At time with Jordan. Is this mic on? The mic is live. Alright, we are ready to go. Foodie talk. Alright. On the radio, let's stop footing. Yes, this is AI. Keen to get started. Pump those ratings up high. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Alrighty guys, welcome back to another episode of Airtime with Jordan. I'm your host Jordan Faso, and today on the podcast we're just going to keep it a bit shorter today. I'm going to go through the power rankings after round 11 for all the 18 clubs, and got a bit of movement there this week, and then as per usual, we'll give a bit of a summary on each team's weekend, and then as I said, keeping it a bit shorter today, so we're just going to do the power rankings and then the Secret Star Society inductee for round 11. So another young player who sort of caught my eye over the, well, not necessarily that round, but over the course of the season as well. So with that being said, let's get into it. And we've got the Magpies still number one on my power rankings. They just keep getting it done, and they went in against North Melbourne with a relatively undermanned team, and it didn't matter on the weekend. They were neck and neck up until 3/4 time, and then just blew them out of the park in the last quarter. And I sort of spoke last week about maybe they're peaking too early, but if you're able to win games like this, I know it's a much less talented team in North Melbourne, but if you're able to win games like they did on the weekend with less talent out there, able to rest some guys here and there, and keep them fresh for the back end of the year, then that's pretty impressive. And I think that's a they've racked up enough wins now where they have the luxury of being able to do that potentially, and really just can't say anything really bad about Collingwood at the moment. They're playing very, very well week in, week out. So, bringing it every week. That's why they're still number one on my board at the moment. Brisbane Lions, they're still second. They had a really dominant display in the midfield on the week, and they didn't even need Oscar McInerney. Darcy Fort, the premiership ruckman for the Brisbane Lions, was plenty compared to the Hawks midfield anyway. So, the mids just dominated the poor Hawthorn midfielders in the end, and I think Charlie Cameron as well probably had the best 5-minute stretch he's had in, I don't know, probably the last 2 years at least, and really broke the game open. He kicked 3 goals in the matter of about that many minutes as well, and he just ripped that game open. And the Lions, they have so many contributors that they can just sort of flip a switch when they need to, and the emergence of Logan Morris continues. He just does not miss in front of goal, and it's a pretty big luxury to have when you can just fill in they lose Joe Danaher in the off-season after he retires, and he was there last year as well, but Logan Morris fills that void very nicely for them. And loving what they're doing, and very impressive win on the weekend down at EMCG, where they hadn't beaten the Hawks since 2004 and hadn't beaten them in general since 2019, which even I was surprised by. So really good win, and good to get the bogey team out of the way for the next half of the year. Still got the Bulldogs third on the board in the power rankings. I think that they showed that, although they lost on the weekend down in Geelong, they are absolutely going to show up anywhere at any time at this point in the year anyway. And their midfield is just really undeniable at this point in time, with Bont, Libber and Ed Richards obviously leading the way, and Matt Kennedy too, can't forget him. He's having an absolute ripper of a year. So they got 4 really, really hard contested mids that, I don't know how you're going to combat them in finals. They're ground ball kings as well. So, really excited for the Dogs midfield at this point in the year. They're looking very, very good. And as I said, I know they've lost, but I feel pretty good about them moving forward. They didn't have, obviously, Sam Darcy, who's not too far away. Liam Jones has missed a bit of footy this year, and I think, when Shannon Neal decides to show up and kick 5 goals against you, and you only have one key defender. Most of the time, a lot of the focus is going on Jeremy Cameron, so having another key defender would have helped in this one a lot. And that being said, Rory Lobb I thought was outstanding on the weekend. Very impressed by him. His cleanliness and ability to attack the ball was really, really good on the weekend, and he's having a great year, I think, Rory Lobb. And the Doggies just continue to impress, even when they lose. They lose in very respectable fashion, I think. So always tough down in Geelong, but I think that they probably were the better team for probably more of the night. It was just like that early burst that Geelong got out to in the second quarter there. So really impressed with the Dogs, and as I said, their midfield is just going to be a lot to deal with going forward. And then on the Geelong side, they've moved up a spot for me. They've moved from 5th to 4th this week, and yeah, I called out Shannon Neal last week, and he had an absolute blinder. He kicked 5 goals on the weekend. So him and Jezza, when your two key forwards kick, what was it, 11 goals between them, you're going to be pretty hard to beat, especially when they kick as straight as they did. So really good to see that him stand up after they've obviously invested a bit of time and effort into him. And Bailey Smith as well, his strong start to the year sort of continues. I don't think he was super dominant throughout the game, but especially late in the contest, he won some really key clearances against the Dogs midfield to give the Cats just field advantage when the Dogs needed to make that charge and put some scores on the board. Late in the game, won really, really key clearances, and I think he's that sort of 60 to 100 metre player when he runs and kicks. So just getting that sort of ground and territory in the Cats' favour late was really instrumental, I thought, and good on him for getting the win against the old team as well. 5th, we have the Gold Coast Suns. They've gone up a spot as well, gone from 6th to 5th. Good win against a plucky St Kilda team, and they're at their bogey ground in Marvel Stadium as well. So good to get a win there. Little bit worried about the Suns. It's 3 weeks in a row against the Dogs, Hawks, and Saints that they've still won each of those games, but it must be said that they've definitely allowed a lot of late game surges from those teams, which they obviously held off in the end, but just a little bit of a trend that you don't want to let sort of seep into your game too much, I don't think. So just one to keep an eye on with the Suns there. Adelaide, they've gone from 7th to 6th for me. Their smaller forward line looked pretty good. Obviously, it was against the Eagles with Tex out injured, so it's sort of one data point that they can look at and say it kind of worked on the weekend, I guess, with that smaller forward line. But some good performances from the Adelaide players. Jordan Dawson, again, huge match from him. Another 30 possession game and kicked 2 goals, 3 on the weekend. So good to see him continue his really, really strong form across the season. Riley Field-Thorpe played really well as well, and then Josh Rochelle was another one sort of similar to Shannon Neal. I called him out a bit last week, saying he has to be a bit more consistent. You want a bit more from him, and we got that on the weekend. He sort of told me to shut up, and he kicked 5 goals and had 16 touches as well. So really good confidence booster for Josh Rochelle. Another good game on the year, and hopefully keeps the momentum flowing for the back half of the year now. 7th, we have the Hawthorn Football Club, and I've dropped them from 4th to 7th this week. I fear they just aren't very good at the moment. At least they're good enough to beat the lesser teams, but are definitely playing mid-table footy right now. It's another loss against a credible opponent. They haven't been able to beat anyone of note this year, and that's sort of why I'm sort of losing faith a little bit in their ability to compete in finals. I think they'll still get there, but if they're not able to beat anyone going into the finals, they're definitely not going to do it once they're there, are they? So, I think that the defense is still really, really good, and I still have belief on that end of the ground that it can be one of the best in the league. But it is hard, obviously, when the midfield just leak that many centre bounces. Brisbane absolutely one of the best centre bounce teams, so take that again with a grain of salt. But I think it is showing a few holes in Hawthorn's team at the moment. They have some really good defence, but everything else is just sort of especially without Will Day, it's up in the air, especially in the midfield. The forward line is pretty non-functional at the moment. I think they still don't have a key forward who's consistently going to be able to bring the ball to ground. So the smalls, if they're not in the game, are going to stay out of the game. It's a common theme we've seen throughout the season, and it was the main thing that I sort of flagged heading into the year, and it's been even more of an issue than I thought it would have been at the start of the year. So not great for them. Good to see that Connor McDonald has finally had a good game though. He had 3 goals in the first half, ended up with 20 touches as well. So a really good game from him, finding some form. But as I said, the mids are the main issue right now. John Newcomb is just a one-man show at the moment. James Warple is playing fine, but if I was the Hawks, I wouldn't be rushing to re-sign him necessarily. And I think Will Day's injury, I didn't expect it to have this much of an impact, but they almost need 2 Will Days at the moment, and I expect them to be pretty aggressive in the off-season if this midfield group is unable to improve things, because as I said, I'm a believer in the defence. The issues are starting in the midfield, and they're just unable to get anything moving, and getting any. They were so good at centre clearance, particularly last year when they were on that role, and it's just not the same thing this year. So unfortunately, the Hawks have moved down 3 places on the power rankings. Following them at 8th on the power rankings are the Giants at the moment, and good win by them in Toby's 250th. Of course, Finn Callahan was out, so we did see more Toby in the middle, and he had an absolute blinder. He had 28 touches, 3 goals, 3 as well. So having another All-Australian calibre year for mine is Toby Green, and they didn't let the Blues dominate the clearances, which, if you're going to be able to break even with the Blues, which I think they might have lost by 2 clearances or something on the day, but you most of the time you're going to win. The Blues don't punish you enough with that clearance domination, and I think Kieran Briggs as well was just better than Tom De Koning, or at least broke even with him as well, which I wouldn't have necessarily seen heading into the game. And as I said, if you're going to win those split the clearances with the Blues, you're going to beat them 9 times out of 10, I'd say. So they obviously got on top of that area and didn't look back, and it was too good in the end. Freo, Luke Jackson. Freo at 9th on the power rankings. Luke Jackson had another near best on grounds performance for him, and I'll keep banging that drum. You can never play him and Sean Darcy together again, I don't think, after seeing how well he's played since he's gone out, and of course it's coincided with Freo going on a bit of a run here. So this is the Freo that we sort of thought you might get. Alex Pearce obviously had a bit of a suspension issue on the weekend. He's out for 3 weeks unless they decide to challenge it, so we'll see what happens there. And I think Freo are building nicely. I think I'm sort of not going to fully trust them, as you've probably listened to the podcast, and they're sort of up and down Freo, especially in my eyes anyway. So hopefully this Luke Jackson move is the move that sort of solidifies them, not solidifies them, but just gives them a bit more consistency around the ball, and they aren't playing 17 on 18 all the time with Sean Darcy out there. So I think that's definitely an advantage, and hopefully they can be more consistent because of that. Melbourne, they've moved up 2 spots. I definitely wasn't a believer in the D's coming into the year. They had that horrible start as well, but the last sort of month of footy, they've really shown that they are on the improve, and a big part of that is Cozzy Pickett. He is just putting together his best year by far in the AFL, and if you're Melbourne, pay him whatever he wants, because he's probably one of, and that goes for Freo too, if he does end up going over to Freo, but pay him whatever he wants, because he's probably one of 3 players in the league, if that are capable of, kicking a bag of 5 or more, and also having 25 touches, providing elite pressure as well. So there's not many people in the game right now who have his ceiling on and impact on a game. It's pretty incredible what he's put together over the last sort of month or so himself. So Cozzy Pickett playing really, really well, and him going to another level, and of course Max Gawn playing at the level he is. It's no wonder that they're playing better of late, of course, with contributions from Petrarca, and Jake Bowie's been really good all year as well, and Trent Rivers is sort of coming on of late as well. So there's definitely a little bit of upside here with Melbourne. I don't think that they're going to play finals still, but they're playing a lot better than they were at the start of the year, and that's probably what their fans wanted. They didn't want to see this iteration of the team and all the premiership sort of champions bow out the way they sort of started the year. So good for them for getting on top again, and playing really, really good footy at the moment. Coming in at 11th on the board this week are the Carlton Footy Club, and another disappointing result for the Blues. They aren't horrible, but they just aren't really that great either at the moment, and I sort of spoke a bit about why that is the case last week on the podcast, but at least on field. But as for off field and the list management side of things, I honestly think after watching on the weekend they'd be better. They'd be for the better letting Tom De Koning go. He had that really strong start to the season where he hasn't been able to really recapture that form necessarily, and we see him on the weekend, and he's breaking even with Kieran Briggs, and that's not really a shot at Kieran Briggs. I'm not the biggest fan of his in the world, but someone who's breaking even with a ruckman who's absolutely a mid-tier ruckman, possibly to the lower end of the competition, definitely doesn't deserve upwards of $1 million, let alone the 1.7 that the Saints are going to offer. So I think if you're Carlton, you just take that, whatever pick you get for him, especially considering they don't have their own pick this year. You're going to get a pretty good compensation based on whatever the Saints are going to offer. So, I think that, the fact they don't have this pick, the fact that, they might get a really good pick for him, I don't know, it just makes sense to me that you wouldn't, put yourselves further in a salary cap squeeze when you're already so reliant on so few at the top. Then you're just going to double down on that and try and sign Tom De Koning for what's probably going to be more than anyone else on your list when it comes down to it, in order to keep him to stay. So, I just think that it's probably not in their best interest to keep him at this point, unless he's going to be the guy that, we saw across the first 2 or 3 games of the year. And yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say how they get out of this hole, and actually keep improving, or whether they bottom out and then go again, because I don't know whether that's very stomachable for the Blues supporters necessarily. But, the timelines are a little bit all over the place. You have all these senior guys who are 27 plus, and then you've taken Jagger Smith, who's unfortunately done his ACL, and he's on a different timeline. And then you in not this draft, the draft after, at least they're going to get the number 1 pick given to them with Andrew Walker's son is actually going to be the number 1 pick in that draft. Apparently, that's what he's ranked anyway at this point in the cycle. So, exciting things for Blues fans, but it sort of just, again, confuses the timeline that you're going to be on. You've got all these old guys who are ready to win now, and then you've got a couple of good young talents on the way up. So it's just a matter. It's going to be interesting to see how they balance that, and maybe that's why they took Jagger Smith this draft, with the eyes towards Andrew Walker's kid as well, trying to pair those two up. And obviously Sam Walsh is still quite young too. So I think, maybe you have the midfield of the future still, but you're definitely not going to have, Cripps in that when they're ready to compete. Coming in at 12th on the board are the Sydney Swans, and they've dropped 2 places for me from 10th to 12th this week. And probably the most disappointing team for me this year are the Swans, and not exactly a world beater are the Melbourne Footy Club, but they just look like a class above the Swans on the weekend. And I'm not sure whether it's Cox or the players or the embarrassing grand final defeat, who knows, but yeah, it's looking like a club that definitely doesn't believe in any sort of ceiling right now, and are just sort of going through the motions at the moment. I just don't think they're very competitive. And I know they're missing a few players here and there, but it's not really an excuse to be losing to the D's the way they did on the weekend. Maybe, and I hope for Swans fans' sake, it's just a bit of a gap year for them, and they'll be back around the mark again next year. But yeah, I definitely think we can put a line through their season, and even their finals chances at the moment. I'm not very confident in them turning the season around, and it's going to take a lot for Errol Goulden and Papley to turn around when they do come back. And as I said, they might just be out of the race by that point anyway, so it's not going to matter. 13th on the board are the Bombers. They haven't moved up or down for me this week, but they just cannot stay out of trouble with the injuries at the moment, with Ben Mackay, Zach Reid, and Kyle Langford going down over the weekend. So that makes Sam Draper, Nick Bryan, Zach Reid, Harry Jones, Jordan Ridley, of course, is already out, and Kyle Langford as well. You're adding and Ben Mackay, sorry. So that's all those guys, 190 centimeters plus, all probably in their starting team, and none of them are going to play this weekend against the Lions. So they probably lose that game anyway. So in theory, probably not a bad week to rest a few guys as well. 14th in the power rankings are the Port Adelaide Power, and this Ken Hinkley farewell tour isn't really going to plan, is it? And Gold Coast owning the Power's first round pick this draft, whilst being in the position that many thought Port Adelaide might be in this year, is pretty funny to me, at least. And I'm not a fan of the Power, if you couldn't tell, and just personally, I'm just not a fan of being a Hawks fan, of course, and kind of loving the downfall at the moment. And it's probably one of the, just obviously might be hard to separate the two, but speaking objectively, at least, this is one of the worst seasons that Ken has been involved in as coach of the Power. And it's hard to say that it's not because he has one foot out the door. And I kind of wonder whether they do pull the trigger prematurely. Like, you're just wasting time at the moment, not implementing Josh Carr's game plan. Just holding on to Ken for the sake of it, just because you came out and publicly said it, and the team's going nowhere. You may as well use the back half of the year to at least try and implement any sort of game plan you can that's going to benefit from them for next year, because it's starting to look like a bit of a lost season for them, at least. And they still have a few guys that you could keep around for a rebuild, but the issue is that it's not starting this year. They don't have their first round pick, so it's starting next year at the earliest. And they couldn't have really afford to have a down year with the traded pick, and they went all in, obviously, with bringing in Jack Lukosius and Joe Richards, and losing Dan Houston. So they essentially wasted 2 years here, and these following guys are all going to be 28 plus by the end of next season. You've got obviously Boak, who probably won't be playing, Aliir, Ollie Wines, Darcy Byrne-Jones, Willie Rioli, Ryan Burton, Finlayson. They're all going to be 30 plus, and then Yeah, you're going to go through a rebuild, because if you're not good enough now, you're not going to be good enough in 2 years' time, and that leaves you starting a rebuild when Rosie and Butters are 27, entering like sort of the middle part of their prime, potentially late part of their prime, depending how you see it, and still obviously good footy ahead of them beyond those years. But the only really young guys they have in their best 22 at the moment are Jason Horne-Francis, Lockie Jones, Miles Bergman, and Jace Burgoyne. So there's only 4 guys that you're trusting for the next decade or so, part of your core at least. So yeah, very long road ahead for Port without and without any significant changes. It's going to be even longer. So I can sort of start to see why they might like to trade Zach Butters a year early, just to sort of expedite the process a bit. And if they realise that he might not be there for the next sort of contending Port team, then yeah, that's probably not a bad move. 15th on the power rankings, we have the St Kilda Saints, and they haven't moved anywhere from me either last week, and they're sort of like a poor man's Carlton at the moment. They have like 2 or 3 elite players, spoken about the halfbacks, and Cal Wilkie too, I'll put in that category. But Rowan Marshall's really taken a step back this year, I think. So I'm not going to include him. And then the rest of the best 22 may not even get a game at other clubs. So yeah, just not in a really good place at the moment are the Saints list, and that I think Ross Lyon was probably pointing to that on the weekend when he said something along the lines of Gold Coast is the nepo baby of the AFL, and of course alluding to the amount of picks that they've given over their time. But I don't think that's inherently a bad thing that the Gold Coast have been handed picks. Like they haven't done anything in 14 years, so it's not that big of a deal, I don't think. But I find it pretty interesting that he's so focused on the Gold Coast kids when, how about looking in your own backyard? I mean, the Saints got given Mitch Owens and Marcus Windhager from their academy themselves, and of course they're not probably on the same level as some of the other Gold Coast academy kids at least, but, they have an academy themselves, they've used it, they've benefited from it, so I'm not that concerned. And if you're so concerned about the kids that the Gold Coast are getting, Ross Lyon, then how about you actually focus on your own and develop your own? On the weekend we saw Bradley Hill play. He's been fine, but has played one actively good game for the year, I think. Zach Jones, Mason Wood, Hunter Clark all played on the weekend. All average players. Okay. And if you're the Saints, do you really need to see these guys regularly out on the field? And none of those guys are game changers. I understand you need some experience, and you're not going to dump them all and then play all the kids. But on the weekend you have Lance Collard, Hugo Garcia, Liam Henry, and Ari Schulmaker, all guys who have some talent, have some upside, all playing 2s on the weekend. So how are you going to advance as a club if you're not going to play the kids who have some perceived talent? And then the one kid that your club has developed and has become a really good player, Isaiah Wanganeen-Malira, has absolutely every reason to leave later this year. You have shown no development in the 3 years that you've been there. It's Ross's 3rd year in charge now, and they've gone backwards every year. So it's either him, it's the recruiting, or it's both. Nothing is sort of clicking, and they don't really necessarily have the blue chip prospects where you're like, oh, it's okay, we suck at the moment, but these guys will be good in a few years. It's really only him is the one that you're guaranteed there's going to be an absolute A grader. So I think that if you're Isaiah Wanganeen-Malira, as much as I would like him to stay at the Saints, why would he at this point? And then as I said in the Blues section, if their big swing is for Tom De Koning, a ruckman who isn't even a consistent top 5 ruck in the game, then I don't know, if that's going to be your big swing and you're hoping that turns everything around, then you're going to be sorely mistaken, and please don't let that happen if you're the Saints list manager. I honestly think that's malpractice to be offering him that much money to join the Saints. So, as for Ross, I think you just got to worry about yourself. Even if the Suns are a nepo baby, who cares? You have bigger issues, and the Suns aren't the reason that you're failing as a club at the moment. So, yeah, I think that... with that being said, I think the Saints need to have a look in their own backyard and actually start developing their own play. Coming in at 16th on the power rankings are North Melbourne. Yeah, yikes, indeed. They not that they were dominant here or anything, but they had a real chance to prove that. Not dominated here. But they had a real chance to prove that they could be competitive against better teams, and we saw them compete against Brisbane a few weeks ago. Had the draw down in Tassie, and I don't know, you'd be really hoping that you could sort of at least be competitive in these matches now. They were down 3 heading into the last quarter where, they would almost fancy themselves and at least expected to come close and be competitive, but it will, you can't blame experience either. The Collingwood average games on the weekend was 122 versus North Melbourne's 101, so not a huge difference there. The midfield should have been better as well. Like Davies Uniacke getting flat out bullied and beaten by Ned Long is not a great look considering the difference in those contracts. And I think just generally a really tough loss for them in what was a winnable situation for them heading into the fourth anyway. So bit of a step back for North for me at least in this one. And then closing out the power rankings, we have the Tigers and the Eagles. They're 17th and 18th. No movement there, obviously, and not much to report on those two teams over the weekend. Probably the biggest thing that happened was West Coast being involved in a big melee with the Adelaide Crows, which is probably the most exciting thing that happened in this one from an Eagles or Tigers perspective. So we'll leave those two teams there. And with that being said, let's close out the today with the Secret Star Society inductee for round 11, and second week in a row that I'm going to go with a key defender, and we're going to call Zach Reid the Secret Star for this week. And probably not the best week considering he just did his hammy, but I think that what we've seen from him this year, we can definitely, I definitely think that he's going to be a star and potentially a future All-Australian as well, backman, at least in my opinion. And if he can get a better run with injuries, it's going to be a higher chance of that happening. But everything is looking really good from his development and his performance on field this year. He's a 202 centimetre key back who uses the ball pretty well, and those guys don't really grow on trees. So I've picked some stats amongst the key backs so far this year, and he's 13th in the league amongst key backs in kicking efficiency. He's 12th for metres gained, 2nd in tackles, 9th in defensive one-on-one percentage loss, 4th in pressure acts, and 8th in score involvement. So some really good vitals there for Zach Reid and his influence on the game. And obviously a lot of that is effort stats, but also his skill stats are looking pretty good as well. And I think ultimately he needs to improve in like his intercepting sort of part of his game, and I think that sort of comes with the more experience that he's going to get, and he obviously hasn't had a lot of that to date, but I expect that to sort of translate once he gets more experience. He's going to start getting more intercept possessions, intercept marks and spoils and that sort of thing when he's able to read the play a bit more. But his effort and skills definitely are holding up right now at the moment, and really excited to see the next step for him in getting those like really important key defender stats in intercept possessions, marks and spoils, of course. So really enjoyed watching him get some games this year, and truly think he could be the next great key defender for Essendon. And unfortunately, he did his hammy on the weekend, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be as bad as some of the other injuries he's had over the time. So praying it's on the precautionary side for him. And just to close out his segment, I ran his stats on the year, and he has some pretty impressive comparisons in terms of key defenders around the league at the moment. And statistically, he's comparing to Tom Barrass, Jeremy Howe, Riley Bice, interestingly enough, James O'Donnell from the Doggies, Cal Wilkie, Toby Pink, and Aiden Core to close it out. So the archetype is there, and as I said, really liking what I'm seeing from him so far, and I think he's definitely an absolute keeper for the Bombers. So thanks for listening, guys, and we'll be back next week.